when the barefoot Filipino boy stepped onto the America's Got Talent stage with 3 cats beside him. People smiled, politely, but no one believed. Simon Cowell leaned back, unimpressed. Whispers filled the room. But what the judges didn't know was this: those cats had once saved the boy from loneliness, hunger, and giving up. And in just a few moments, their bond would silence the entire theater. The boy's story did not begin on a stage filled with lights and applause. It began in silence. In a small Filipino village, tucked away from the noise of the world. Mornings came early, not with excitement, but with uncertainty. The roof above his family's home leaked when it rained, and the walls whispered stories of years spent holding together through hope alone. Some days, breakfast was a luxury. Other days, it was a memory. He learned young what it meant to go without. Without new clothes. Without toys. Without promises that tomorrow would be easier. While other children dreamed of becoming doctors or athletes, his dreams were quieter. He dreamed of full meals. Of his parents smiling without worry. Of nights where sleep came without hunger, gnawing at his chest. School was a challenge. His worn shoes marked him as different, and sometimes cruel. Laughter followed him home. But he never complained. He carried his struggles the way many children do, with a silent strength no one notices. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of orange and gold, he heard soft cries near a pile of discarded boxes. 3 tiny kittens, huddled together, thin, trembling, forgotten. They were hungry, scared, alone. He saw himself in them. Instead of walking away, he knelt down. He shared what little food he had saved. From that moment on, the cats followed him everywhere: his shadow, his comfort, his family. When the world felt heavy, they were there. When loneliness crept in, they curled beside him, reminding him that he mattered. Life didn't magically improve. Bills still piled up. Food was still uncertain. But kindness gave his days purpose. Each night, after finishing his chores, he practiced with the cat, teaching them small movements, gentle tricks. Not for fame, not for money. Just for joy. Neighbors laughed. Cats don't belong on stages, they said. Dreams don't feed families. But the boy kept going. Because in those moments of training, he wasn't poor. He wasn't invisible. He was a teacher, a leader, a believer. The cats trusted him completely. They listened because he listened to them first. He never raised his voice, never forced a move. Everything was built on patience, on love. What no one realized was this: while the boy was training the cats were saving him. They gave him hope when the world offered none. And in the quiet darkness of his village, a dream was forming, fragile, impossible, but alive. A dream that would one day travel farther than he ever imagined. What the world would later call talent was, for the boy, simply love repeated every day, with no backyard, no training equipment, and no money for lessons. He turned ordinary moments into practice. A narrow wooden plank became a balance beam. A cracked plastic stool became a platform. Every corner of his small home carried the marks of effort and patience. Training never started with commands. It began with trust. He spoke to the cats softly, as if they understood every word, and, in a way, they did. He learnt their moods, their fears, their limits. When one cat hesitated, he didn't force it. He waited. When another jumped too early, he laughed, not scolded. Each small success was celebrated like a miracle. Some nights, exhaustion weighed on him. After long days helping his family, his body wanted rest. But the cats would sit nearby, watching him with calm, unblinking eyes. In those moments, he felt responsible not just for their care, but for their future. They had been abandoned once. He refused to abandon them again. The village watched from a distance. Children giggled when they saw the cats following him in perfect lines. Adults shook their heads. Why waste time on animals? They asked. He never argued, because the cats gave him something the world had not belief. When food was scarce, he fed them first, trusting that somehow things would work out. When storms flooded their shelter, he wrapped them in old clothes and held them close, whispering promises he wasn't sure he could keep. Slowly, something beautiful happened. The cats began to respond not just to gestures, but to emotion. They sensed his patience. They mirrored his calm. They moved, not because they were trained, but because they trusted him completely. In those moments, the boy understood something profound. Kindness is not weakness. It is leadership. He wasn't commanding animals. He was guiding souls. At night, as the village grew quiet, he imagined a future where their bond mattered, where the world could see what love, even in poverty, could create. He didn't dream of fame. He dreamed of dignity, for himself, for his family, for the animals who believed in him when no one else did, and without realizing it, every step they practiced, every leap perfected, was preparing them for a stage far beyond their village, a place where trust would be tested, where doubt would be loud, and where their bond would speak louder than words. The moment the boy stepped onto the America's Got Talent stage, the world felt suddenly too big. Blinding lights washed over him, erasing everything he knew: the village, the narrow paths, the quiet nights of practice. The roar of the audience pressed against his chest, heavy and overwhelming. For a second, he wondered if he belonged there at all. 3 cats sat beside him, perfectly still. The judges studied him carefully. Some smiled politely, others leaned back, arms crossed. There was curiosity, but also skepticism. Animal acts had been seen before. Cats, especially, were known for doing whatever they wanted. Simon Cowell raised an eyebrow. Cats? He asked, his voice carrying doubt. The boy nodded, his hands trembling slightly. English wasn't his first language, and his answers were simple. He explained where he came from, how long he had trained, and why the cats meant everything too. Pangier's voice was soft, almost swallowed by the size of the room. A few audience members chuckled. It wasn't cruel, but it wasn't belief either. The music began for a brief moment. Nothing happened. The silence stretched painfully. Doubt crept back in. The boy felt his heart race. He lowered himself to the floor, meeting the cats at eye level. He didn't speak loudly. He didn't gesture dramatically. He simply trusted them. The first cat moved slow, deliberate. A jump. A balance perfect. The room shifted. The second cat followed, weaving with precision, responding not to commands, but to connection. Gasps rippled through the audience. Phones lowered. Smiles faded into disbelief. Then the third cat stepped forward. This was the hardest part, the one they had practiced countless times under flickering lights and tired nights. The boy held his breath. The cat paused, then leapt. Applause erupted mid-act. The boy barely noticed. His focus never left the cats. Every move felt like a quiet conversation between them. A reminder of nights spent hungry but hopeful. Of storms weathered together. Of trust earned, not demanded. The judges leaned forward now. Simon Cowell sat still, eyes locked on the stage. As the final move landed, the music stopped. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then, the theater exploded: cheers, clapping, disbelief. The boy stood frozen. Then he heard the sound of people believing. Simon Cowell rose from his seat. He didn't speak at first. He didn't need to. In that moment, doubt had nowhere left to stand. What began as a questionable act had transformed into something undeniable, a story of patience, compassion, and courage, told without words. And for the first time in his life, the boy realized that his kindness had carried him farther than fear ever could. The applause didn't fade, it grew louder, fuller. Like a wave crashing over the stage, the boy stood still, frozen in the center of it all. The sound felt unreal, as if it belonged to someone else's dream. For years, his world had been quiet, filled with whispered hopes and unspoken fears. Now, thousands of voices were calling back to him at once. His hands shook as he looked down at the cats. They sat calmly, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. And in that simplicity, the boy felt something break open inside his chest. Then, it happened. Simon Cowell slowly pushed back his chair and stood up. The room gasped for the boy. Time slowed. He had watched this moment on borrowed screens, in shops where televisions played silently. He had seen people stand for legends for greatness. Never did he imagine it would be for him. Tears filled his eyes, but he didn't wipe them away. He didn't want to miss a second. Simon spoke carefully, his voice softer than usual. He didn't talk about tricks or technique. He talked about connection. About how rare it was to see something honest on a stage built for spectacle. "This," he said, gesturing toward the boy and the cats, "is real." The boy felt his knees weaken. The other judges joined in, praising not just the performance, but the story behind it. The trust, the patience, the heart. The audience responded with cheers that shook the theater walls. But the most powerful moment came quietly, as the boy listened. He realized something profound. This wasn't just applause for a performance, it was recognition for his kindness. For every night, he chose patience over frustration. For every meal he shared when he had little to give. For every moment he believed in creatures the world had already overlooked. He knelt down, pulling the cats close, pressing his forehead gently to theirs. The cameras captured it, but the meaning was deeper than any lens could show. For the first time, he felt seen, as a poor boy. Not as an animal trainer, but as someone whose compassion had created something extraordinary. In that instant, the boy understood that success wasn't about escaping where he came from. It was about honoring it. The judge's words faded into the background. The applause stopped. All he could hear was his own heartbeat and the quiet purring of the cats who had carried him here. This was the miracle, not fame, not money, but the realization that kindness, even in its smallest form, can travel across oceans and touch hearts that never expected to feel. And as Simon Cowell nodded toward him with genuine respect, the boy smiled, knowing that no matter what happened next, his life had already changed forever. Long after the applause faded and the lights dimmed, the boy sat quietly backstage, his 3 cats curled beside him. The noise of celebration echoed in the distance, but in that moment, peace felt louder than cheers. He rested his hand gently on their fur, grounding himself in what was real. Nothing about him had changed overnight. He was still the same boy who came from a small Filipino village. Still the same child who knew hunger and hardship. But something inside him had shifted forever. For the first time, he believed that his kindness had valued art in his village success. Had always felt like something reserved for others, people born into opportunity. People with resources, people who never had to choose between food and dreams. But standing on that stage had rewritten the rules he thought life followed. He had not won by being louder. He had not won by being stronger. He had won by being gentle. The world had finally seen what his village could not. That compassion is a kind of courage, that patience is a kind of power, and that love, when given freely, has the ability to cross borders and change lives. Messages poured in from across the world. Strangers wrote about how the boy reminded them of forgotten dreams, of kindness they once gave but stopped believing. Mattered. Pangaea shared his story with their children, teaching them that success doesn't begin with money, it begins with heart. But the boy measured his victory in simpler ways. He imagined bringing food home without worry. He imagined building a safer place for his family. He imagined rescuing more animals who, like him, only needed someone to believe in them. And through it all, the cats stayed close, silent proof that love returns what you give. Before leaving the stage that night, the boy looked back one last time. He whispered a quiet thank you, not to the judges, not to the audience, but to the version of himself who never gave up. The boy who chose kindness when bitterness would have been easier. His story reminds us of something the world often forgets. You don't need to be rich to change lives. You don't need permission to be kind. And you don't need a stage to matter sometimes. All it takes is a small heart, a few forgotten souls, and the courage to believe that real love can still perform miracles. And when it does, the world listens.